Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom, where we bring you engaging conversations and respectful disagreement across the social spectrum.
Injected with the quirks of everyday life.
Grow up as we navigate the complexities of this modern world with all the humor and warmth we can muster.
And the occasional gentle ribbing. We're glad you're here. Happy listening.
Hey. Welcome to Two Millennials and Mom. I'm Callie.
I'm Cole.
I'm Mom.
How are you guys today?
Good.
Hanging in there.
So we're going to start here. I guess we can blame Reddit for today's episode and kind of my accidental Alice in Wonderland style trip down the rabbit hole of the manosphere. So that at one point I was struck by a commenter on Reddit saying that the manosphere nearly killed me, and others talked about how toxic and relationship damaging their journey into the manosphere was, and really my heart just broke as well as it kind of scared me. So for men of Cole's generation and for men of the future and for men of tomorrow, I mean, this was kind of scary to me. But then Cole sent us a video from the Diary of a CEO. It's a fascinating conversation with Scott Galloway and Logan. And suddenly things kind of started clicking. That episode opened up a much deeper conversation about modern masculinity, dating apps, and why so many young men are feeling disconnected, angry, left behind. So this isn't just a one-off topic. It's a trend that we've been seeing bubbling up for a while now. Boys falling behind in school, struggling with relationships, grappling with what it means to even be a man anymore. So today we're following that thread down the rabbit hole and unpacking what's really going on with young men, masculinity, and the messy side of modern connection. So buckle up.
Yeah, that Diary of a CEO episode was super fascinating. And I will admit, it was a little daunting to go and watch because it was so long. And then I started watching it on YouTube and literally pulled out a legal pad and started taking notes because I was like, oh my gosh, this is so fascinating. Oh my gosh, this is so wild. And so I'm super excited to kind of jump into this with you guys. We've had a little bit of this conversation piecemeal, a little here, a little there, a little about this part and a little about that part. But I do think that as a whole, the men of tomorrow were very different than the men of yesterday. How we treat them, how they got to where they are and where they're going, the trajectory of their journeys has changed so much. And I'm a little nervous about it.
Well, and their frustration.
Yeah, it's very much, I would say, changed the perception of ourselves.
Yes.
So I'm waiting for this. This is going to be a very interesting kind of conversation with you guys. So basically, I think the background of this story is that women are ascending and men are descending. So even gender roles are shifting. And because we've talked about there's a certain group, and specifically, just to clarify, the stats show that women in urban areas, particularly DC and New York, are earning more prior to their 30s than men are. So they're more financially secure even at this point. And so then childbearing comes in and that stat comes down.
Kind of plateaus.
Yeah, absolutely changes. With that, and I think there's a sense of what masculinity is. It feels like that it has changed. And I don't know if that's coming from white male privilege. Do y'all think that's shifted?
I think some of it has kind of really launched and changed from the push for feminism. Cole said it so eloquently a couple of days ago. We have raised women up. We've risen women while pushing men down. And I don't think that had to be the case. I don't think that it has to be the case, but I think he's right that is what has happened. So we've elevated women at the cost and detriment of men in many ways because we said, hey, women get to be equal. Women get to do these things too. Women have this opportunity as well. Women are smart and worthy and all of this too. And we've missed the two at the end of that sentence. We said, hey, they're more worthy. We've kind of overcorrected, if you will. They're so much more worthy that men have to be less worthy. And I don't think that that's right or fair or reasonable in any capacity. That's not That's not me coming for women. I think women are great, but it doesn't have to come at the cost of men.
I think there's definitely where we don't need to bash feminist progress. And I'm not saying feminism, but female progress. Those are things to be celebrated.
For sure. Like that should not be the goal of the conversation to say, oh, women have it too good.
Right.
That's not the point. The point is that, okay, women are improving and that's great. But now we need to pull the men back up to be there with them.
Right. Yeah. Together as one big happy society where everybody gets to win. Everybody gets to be intelligent. Everybody gets to make money. Everybody gets to do and accomplish their dreams.
At least everyone is given the opportunity to.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Good clarification there.
Statistically, what we're seeing is that decline in male achievement. And that's kind of across multiple sectors, education, employment, even health, which is really kind of strange.
Well, we talked about this in our Blame Millennial episode. We kind of as a society, certainly as the generation of millennials, we have very much tackled our trauma kind of head on. We talked about it like we didn't have a choice. You had to figure it out. That was the only option. And I think that it kind of applies here in kind of that battle of the sexes. Women have gone through and said, hey, I'm going to go to therapy and I'm going to do this and I'm going to fix my stuff for this and I'm going to work through this and I'm going to allow myself to feel these feelings. But the male side of that hasn't caught up. It certainly hasn't kept up. And so men aren't allowed to have emotions and aren't allowed to have feelings and aren't allowed to be frustrated by this. They're not allowed to show those emotions in any way because that makes them not men. That makes them less masculine. That makes them more feminine men. And I don't think that that's right or fair either. We are all human beings and all have emotions and need to be able to have the tools and the skills to process those emotions and work through those emotions so that we can come out the other side of them. And because we've come at all of these, especially young boys, and said, hey, you need to cowboy up. You need to man up. You need to be a man. You don't get to cry. You don't get to do any of this. We have done them a disservice.
Well, and there's a double standard there.
Absolutely.
Women tend to want someone who is vulnerable to them or willing to talk to them or, share emotions with them. And then when they do, we're put off by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I say we, because I'm not going to jump in on that one. But generally, women are put off by what we're asking them to do.
Yeah. So there is kind of a disconnect, I feel like. There is a modern expectation for emotional intelligence from men, but they're never allowed to have the opportunity to either, learn emotional intelligence or display it. Like, all you can do is be stoic or it's the ick.
Yes.
But stoicism is also the ick.
Yeah. So you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Right.
Yeah.
And in that conversation with Scott and Logan and Steve, she works for one of the big dating sites, Hinge. Thank you. And so she is looking at all of this data about how matches are being made, what is successful, what isn't, and the numbers of all of that.
And she's coaching.
Yes.
Both men and women to help them with their relationships.
But she also gives out some kind of staggering statistics, like for one man to get one date to go have a cup of coffee, he has to swipe right 1,000 times to get one person to say yes.
Well,
and
it's a
then
little bit more nuanced than that.
Say that people will come back and say yes, but then ghost you on that. So it turns out being on the average 1,000 swipes.
Takes 200 swipes on average to get a match, and then 4 out of 5 matches will stop responding.
Right. Before the coffee is even had.
Yes. So one of the things that they recommend is that second date default, that you always do a second date, which I think is really interesting because you think in your gut that that, there's no spark here, there's no chemistry here, but they're saying, go do the second date. You need to do the second date.
Yeah. but also like the pool of men. Don't get me wrong. 51% of the population, of modern day population, is women. So it's not super out of balance. But then when you go start talking about dating, the pool of men that are quote unquote available to women, that they consider available to women, like as a woman, I would only accept this specific subsect of that 49% of the overall population, is ridiculous. I mean, Cole, I'm sure you've heard the kind of viral TikTok song about I'm looking for a man in finance, trust fund, 6'5", blue eyes. We've taken, yeah, hey, that's you. I mean, not to knock you, but we have taken and we have pinpointed, we have tunnel visioned everything that we're looking for as a woman in our mate. And we've completely eliminated a
Less than a
humongous
percent of a
chunk.
percent.
Yeah.
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 I mean, when you talk about those statistics, if you put your filter as a female and you say, I don't want anybody who's under 6'2", anyone who makes less than 100,000, then that narrows that pool down.
Has never been married before, has never had kids, doesn't know how to do the work, doesn't accept this. I mean, like all of these things. And then you throw in the political spectrum, must be of this political party, must have these views and beliefs. Like we've created unicorns out of nothing.
This was so funny because she talks about her husband who is shorter.
A short king, she says.
Short king. And she talks about him. And the whole time I'm thinking, if you, and don't get me wrong, I think every girl grows up with that, Prince Charming idea. But if you really put that down on paper and say, this is my hard line, this is where I'm going, you reduce the possibility of meeting somebody that you like. Number one, you miss out on tons and tons of wonderful people if you have that hard stop there. So I think the stats were 2.2% of the population. And here's the other thing. We're creating that 2.2 group of men are saying, I have my choice of whatever I want. I'm out here. I'm going to have a good time. I don't have to settle down. I don't need to do this. And so you're even limiting that more. And it just doesn't make really good sense. So I'm going to blame the dating apps for this, because I think when you have those filters and you put them in, instead of just going out and meeting people and finding somebody that you connect to, that's part of the problem.
Yeah, it was a really interesting point that was made. I'm pretty sure it came from Logan, where she's talking about that missing out on great men because they don't match 100% of their requirements. And let's see, when asked, men said, if you could have 80% of everything that you want in a woman, 75% would say I'm bored. For women, 75% say that 80% of their criteria isn't enough.
Is the baseline.
So men are much more relaxed in their criteria and willing to take, a little bit off of that. And women are really hard about that. And so, I mean, it really leads you to a point to say, if you're not a guy that's 6 foot tall, you have to be thinking, what do I have to offer? I mean, I understand. And this was one of the issues that I had, because Stephen kept talking about everything being emasculated. And I think that is a really poorly used term, because I don't think you feeling not good enough is really emasculating. I think that is.
I think we've talked about it on this podcast before. The definition of those buzzwords changes so much and so drastically from one person to the next, that the moment that you say, hey, this is what masculinity is, or this is how you emasculate someone, or these are the characteristics of that, those vary for all three of us in this conversation right now.
Absolutely.
And so we have such a skewed perception of what that is and what that means. And we're kind of, as a society, are all tolerant of that skewed definition. And so you just don't ever really know where the line is. What is real? What is not? What is real for you? What is real for me? What is not? And so it makes being a respectable person an uphill battle. I am not looking to emasculate you, but if you feel that way, and I don't know it and we don't talk about it, I can't address that. And you just keep perpetuating that same kind of concept in your brain.
Cole, I'm really curious what you think that term means.
Emasculate?
Mm-hmm.
I would say, like, to, in this context, I feel like it's kind of a tough thing to pin down. Like, being emasculate would mean being less masculine or having your masculinity taken away or reduced somehow.
So let me ask this different. Have you had, you're a big guy with a big beard. You come off a little scary, just, initially.
By default.
Walking, by default. Have you felt emasculated? And if so,
of course.
When? Yes?
Oh, certainly there are times where I feel emasculated. I mean, like, and a lot of it is ego in many cases. I can't throw a disc as far as one of my friends. That's
not emasculating.
From the perspective of a guy. Now, that is just pure emotional lizard brain ego. That is not rational logic. Like, my friend Nate can throw a frisbee way further than me. We play a lot of disc golf. He also practices a lot more than me. That doesn't mean that I'm not, like, jealous of his ability to throw a disc better than I can.
But that's still not emasculating.
It may not be in a quote unquote technical sense, but that doesn't mean that that isn't the way that Cole interprets it in that moment.
Like, I am less masculine than him because he is better at this physical activity than me. That is the definition of...
Holy cow.
I did go and look it up. The official definition of emasculate is to deprive a man of his male role or identity, to make someone or something weaker or less effective. So it literally is the definition that Cole's talking about. He is weaker than Nate when it comes to throwing a frisbee.
I know.
But at the same time, we as a society have sat here and made jokes of all of this. I'm going to take your man card away. You don't get to be as much of a man. I'm more masculine and more manly than you.
You're such a girl.
You're such a girl. Pink, the musical artist, she has a whole thing in her family. They don't call people pussies, because a vagina births babies and does this, and they can get kicked and all of that, and they come back and do all of these strong things. So we're going to use the literal definition of what a vagina does, what a pussy does, and not make a joke of it. And so they call each other, when they're trying to emasculate them, they call them balls, because balls are weaker. I'm serious. I think it's hysterical. It's funny, but we have kind of sensationalized and made a joke of being a man, and that being so transactional. In this situation, I'm taking your man card away because you're not as man as me. And we've made fun of it for so long. It has become a punchline for so long that the seriousness and the reality of it is lost.
It's become a cultural norm.
Being a girl has become a cultural norm when you're not.
This is where, and this was part of my thought while I was listening to this podcast, is, again, we don't have to take away from girls and women to make men better.
Right. But we have chosen to do that over and over and over again. You can't do this, so that makes you a pussy. You can't do this, so you're a girl. We have put that into place that said you're either one or the other. The man is the one who's stronger, and the girl is the one who's bad and weaker. Yeah. And we have chosen to proliferate that narrative of it being one versus the other.
Well, here's another side of that. I think that we've excused boys for bad behavior. And I think there's a line here, and I don't know exactly where it is. There is some truth to boys will be boys.
There is, but I said this yesterday. Boys will be boys is jumping off of the shed trying to use a trash bag as a parachute. Boys will be boys is racing your cars down the highway and getting a speeding ticket. Boys will be boys is going fishing with your homies. It is not raping women.
Yes. Yes.
Well said.
But we have made it an excuse.
We have
perpetuated this being an excuse for doing bad behavior, for being bad humans, not just bad men, bad boys, we have perpetuated it being bad humans.
Yes.
And I think that there is such a stigma around being tough and being manly and being macho that anything that strays from exactly that quote unquote macho definition makes you a girl. And so again, we have said, hey, you are one or the other. One is bad, one is good. And we don't provide men with any kind of outlet. We don't let them talk about their feelings. There is a perception of how they have to be policed so that they can still be man enough, but not too manly. And we've created this impossible standard that said, hey, you have to live by this. Not only do you have to be 6'5", blue eyes, and be in finance, you have to be funny. You have to have this kind of sense of humor. You have to be accepting of my shortcomings and my downfalls, and you have to be encouraging in those moments, and you can't do this, and you can't yell, and you can never raise your voice, and you can never be upset, and we can never disagree. And it's just not reality. That is what, like, that friction alone is what makes humanity the most interesting and the most successful. Are there moments where it's detrimental? Absolutely. But that's how we grow. That's how we learn. That's how we improve and do better. But we have to create an environment where you can fail and get back up. And we don't, especially for men.
I think you said something that just went way under the radar, but you said that's not reality. And that is so true. We're still trying to, and maybe this is our education and standardized testing, put everybody in little boxes, and this is the definition of you. This is the only thing that you can do. And that is not reality. There's just more to people.
Yeah, it's the whole adage, you can't judge a fish by their ability to climb a tree.
Yeah. I mean, and then let's kind of rewind time a little bit on what it is that we're talking about. Let's go to kids in school. We have boys versus girls. That environment of education is set up for women, for girls to thrive and to do better. And so then all of a sudden boys start lagging behind. We've talked about it on this podcast. Cole has talked about how his brain didn't finish developing until in his mid-20s. And we're still holding boys back saying, hey, you have to be meeting this standard that is really easy for girls in lots of situations and in lots of research. A girl can sit there and be patient and learn and absorb that information, where, like Cole said, the boy is going to be a boy and he's thinking about jumping off the roof into the pool. We have created an environment that is not conducive for the different sexes to thrive.
One of the things that came up is that in an all-boys school, they have more recess time because young boys need that downtime,
release,
that unfocus, to be able to roughhouse and play and run and go. And I think that's really valid.
I think another big one that they mention is the vast difference in the number of female role models compared to male role models, and the number of male teachers and coaches is so I mean, it's what, like 24% of teachers are male. I mean, 76% are female.
That's 1 in 4 are a man.
Yeah.
Almost.
Well, and here's one of the things that Galloway pointed out about this. And he said, millions of boys in America whose first male role model is a prison guard.
I mean, Cole, how many male teachers did you have growing up? I didn't have
a coach.
I didn't have male role models in school until high school, and they were all coaches. Every single one of them was a coach.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that there were any male teachers that I had through grade school. I had some coaches in middle school, but I mean, I think I only had one class that was taught by a coach. It was a little bit closer to even, and I would have told you that I had some really strong, really positive male role models through high school that were teachers, but that was also, they were not in an opportunity to be a male role model to everyone in the school, but to a very small select group of students because of the given elective that they had chosen. And so, but I would say if we take a look at everything through all of the teachers that I had K through 12, I don't even know if it would make up 25%.
And one of the points here is that when that kid, and we have 51% divorce rate, or 52 now in America. And so we have one of the largest single mom populations in the world, and that when boys lose that male role model, it is a significant detriment to them. Everything changes. And we talked yesterday some about, there is a stereotype of a strong Black mom. And I think to some degree that's true. I mean, that's where stereotypes come from. But I also think that comes from, they kind of have to be. And
But then
I
again,
think that's
they
mixed
get
in with
shit
fear.
on. Then again, they get shit on. Those Black women are tough and strong and demanding from these men. We take those couple of traits that make them most successful and we demonize them.
Yeah.
You can't win. Nobody can win.
But okay, then we're going to, because Galloway also, who came from a single mom, said the trauma was there because she was always stressed about finances. And so we have a group of women that we do demonize. We have a group of women that that are not making the same kind of salary, who also have more restrictions. They're the only ones who can pick that kid up from school. So they're going to have to take off. That kid gets sick, they're going to have to take off. So there's lots of things that are going on in that whole role.
Working against them.
At a point, your dad and I did a singles class where everybody else was single. And I have a million times respect for these people because of what they do on their own. There were days that your dad walked in that I said, they're yours. You take care of them, you feed them, you get them to bed, you do the homework. Because I'd had enough. And I cannot imagine being a single parent not having that. I mean, that's when you really have to build a community around you that is there to support you. And if we don't allow that, if we demonize the women who are doing that and we don't do that, that's on us.
I mean, what a luxury it is to have somebody, to have a partner that you can come in and say, hey, you take them. I can't do it anymore. It truly becomes a luxury. Not having that luxury, it doesn't put you back to net zero. It becomes a negative really fast.
Really fast. So one of the things that Logan talks about is the impact economically to the whole nation on what this does, because you're lowering birth rates, because marriage is lower. If men aren't getting dates and aren't having dates and don't feel confident in their own, demeanor, then you're lowering birth rates. There's no way around that. That's just happening. And that's statistically proven that those are down. So that even comes up to where it affects generations not so that far in the future, where it went from, we used to have 12 workers for every senior on Social Security. Now we're down to 3 for everyone. That's a big deal. I mean, that means that.
Yeah, not just that. And this is not a purely American issue. Birth rates are dropping across the world.
Yeah,
I mean,
true.
All across Asia, birth rates populations are crashing, largely due to cultural changes. But I mean, just in general, you're talking about having a population that is half the size of their predecessors, supporting a generation economically that is 3 times larger than the average generation. And the kind of economic stress something like that will involve is really scary to think about.
Well, and I mean, it affects your labor force, just who's doing the job in general, and ultimately can affect even your military power, because you don't have, I mean, especially if you're going to restrict who can be there, and you're lowering that down. And can you talk these men who don't feel value of themselves into being
to come and value your country?
warriors?
I think it's harder to do in large numbers. And we kind of skipped over this, but there's a quote that you have here. I say it pretty regularly, but there is a bit of a cycle here where I believe it is hard times create strong men. Strong men create good times. Good times create weak men. weak men create hard times. And so you kind of get through this cycle. And right now, I would say that we're probably at the end of that good times cycle. The last time we had the end of one of those good times cycles was the 1920s, which right after that was followed up by 2 world wars.
But what that means, Cole, just based on the cycle of that quote, is that we have a bunch of weak men right now. We have a bunch of weak men that...
We have a bunch of men who feel weak.
I don't know if I would go there with you on that one. I would say that in general, I don't think my generation is
durable.
Yeah, not as hardy as some previous generations. And I'm not trying to badmouth millennials or Gen X. I'm not trying to badmouth anyone. I'm saying that the circumstances that we were brought in physically were less demanding. Now, politically speaking, I think it's a little bit different. I think that politically and economically, we've probably had a more challenging time. But because of the technological advances, if you will, there's less need for strong backs. Automation is going to continue to remove a lot of that necessity. Automation is going to take over that need for physical strength. But because I think the generations before us had such an emphasis on physical strength, and our generation has such an emphasis on intellectual strength, that we need that intellectual strength, but we didn't have those intellectual mentors to learn from.
Yes. And on top of that, not having those intellectual mentors to learn from, you've had to figure it out yourself. And again, it has been an uphill battle because that is not, quote unquote, the norm that we know and we're used to. And anything different is scary and weird. And we have to make fun of that. We have to give that a hard time. We as a society have to give that a hard time and say, oh, well, that's not my definition of a man, so it doesn't count.
Yeah, we don't have a need for that same level of physical hardiness or physical strength, but because that's kind of what is expected, you're less for not having it.
So are people going to step in and go, that's video games?
I mean,
do I think video games are a facet of this? Sure.
Yeah.
But I also think the divorce rate being so high is, and I think that dating apps are, and I think that the
our
rise
education
of
system
feminism
in general is.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Not letting our kids out to play.
We have an educational system that is developing children for jobs that won't exist by the time they graduate school. And we have 40 years at least.
2 generations.
So one of the things that Galloway talks about is not having wood shop or mechanics or those
hands-on programs.
Yeah, those programs that lead into really
an introduction to the trades.
Yes, thank you. That we've eliminated those in our schools to a large degree, and that we're not producing that person who can go, like you say, into the trades.
Because those jobs are seen socially as less desirable.
I was really trying to avoid the term blue collar, so I was glad when you jumped in because I thought, oh, that's not a good term to use, but it's true.
Yeah, but when you can go and be a software developer versus being a plumber, the sexiness, quote unquote, isn't there. And so then you turn and take that into the kind of next stage of life. And a woman doesn't want a plumber. A plumber is overweight and has his butt crack hanging out all of the time. I don't want a plumber. I want a software developer. I would much rather take somebody like that. But then we're also in this weird situation right now. And I am not at all shitting on plumbers, but we're in this weird situation right now where those quote unquote blue collar trades are in such demand. There is not enough people to fill them that those plumbers are making bank because they can.
Yeah. They're making a lot of money.
They're making a ton of money because there's so few of them, which again goes right back to the economics of supply and demand. They get to charge all of this money because they have the skills and the knowledge. Are you going to have all of your sewage backing up in your house over the charge of this? No, you're not. You're going to pay the freaking plumber and call it a day and be thankful that you don't have sewage pouring out of everywhere. And so, but again, we have demonized all of these not sexy things, whether that is a man who is more physically strong versus emotional intelligence or intellect. And we have demonized a plumber versus a graphic designer, whatever that is. That's us emasculating them for nothing, based on nothing. The world being successful and thriving takes all kinds. That takes plumbers, that takes software developers, so that we can say, hey, how do we best get everybody on the same page, even though we have different skill sets?
So that was a nice segue into politics, because this was a statement that I didn't really understand, that it is the left that has redefined masculinity to mirror feminine traits, that the left is where toxic masculinity has come from. And I struggle to understand that because I didn't see that. I can understand that there's a group of people who look at someone like a Trump, who's kind of that bully, and sees that as masculinity,
A positive.
versus Biden, who's much more quiet and reserved. But is that toxic masculinity?
Well, again, I think that this is all a pendulum. And I think that there is extremes on both sides. No matter where you stand, there is still the far right and the far left. And in some ways, if you want to sit here and say, hey, we're going to, how do I say this? We're going to verbalize what the far left is. That means it's okay for you to be a man who thinks that you're a woman. If you want to be a cat, that far extreme says, hey, anything that you want is okay. You know, you had Tim Walz on the campaign trail. Do whatever you want to do. Just mind your own damn business. But further than that, taking that extreme to the extreme of the far left is you can do anything and everything is okay. And then you've got the far right that is kind of the opposite, with no empathy, no grace for anybody except if you're like me. Everybody needs to be on this same page and agree that this is bad and that is bad and this is bad, and kind of setting those rules. We're going to ban books. We're going to change the way that everybody functions so that we're all more aligned and in the same thing. So those are kind of those extremes. Everything is okay. Nothing is okay. And we've lost the middle. And anybody who is outside of those extremes is being
Which is
fed,
most people,
thanks to the media narrative, is being fed that everybody who is anywhere, even leaning left, thinks that everything is okay every single time. And anybody who even remotely thinks about leaning right means that everything that everybody does is wrong and bad and they're horrible people. Yep. And that's wrong.
So give me a definition of modern masculinity that's not left or right.
I think that's really hard to do in this climate.
Agree.
I mean, masculinity from a dictionary definition would just be displaying the traits of a male. So
what a crap definition that is in 2025.
Yeah, but I mean, we have to understand, like, biologically, what are male traits? Bigger, stronger.
The hunter.
Yeah, provider, typically. And that's another thing to kind of get back to that men are struggling with, is that they are not the default provider in their families anymore, but kind of going back to, they tend to represent the physical capability of mankind as a species, if you will.
No, I'm just sitting here thinking, and don't ask me why it came into my mind, but if you think about lions, and you have the male lion who's big and, the roar and all that.
Not the hunter, though.
Yeah. The female is the hunter. The female is the one who feeds them. If you think about elephants, it is the females who are the ones who are supportive and will
lead the
surround,
herds.
the littler ones and protect them. And so it's really our definition that's off. It isn't that being male has to be big and bulky and uber strong.
Well, I mean, in the mammalian world,
Y'all are prettier.
well,
Better hair.
And yeah, typically within mammals, the male species tends to be larger. But also, if you take a look at a lot of it, I mean, elephants are a great example. Lions are a great example. Gorillas are a great example. They are there not necessarily to be the provider for a group, but they may be the protector of a group. Other than that, they eat, sleep, and procreate. And that's kind of their role.
And the opposite side of that, the female's job is to eat
everything else.
You've got to use her to procreate.
Eat, to sleep, to procreate, to provide.
It's our definition, you guys.
I agree.
our definitions are just so off. Again, it's got to be in this little square,
This box.
round hole that everything has to go in. No, don't go there.
I think I might disagree with you. Maybe I agree with you on how little that box is in this specific instance, but I think in general, we are making it more difficult for ourselves to communicate with each other because of the vagueness, how vague our language has become.
Yes.
Because these words have become so
Fluid.
undefined.
Yes.
Not understanding what someone's intention is by their speech is leading to more issues, I think.
Yeah. Has
Preach
become
on.
more detrimental than productive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like several episodes ago when we were talking about woke to me means something completely different to someone else.
Right.
Yeah.
And how vague these definitions on a lot of these things has become. I don't know if it was that way when you were growing up, Mom, if language was, I mean, the English language
No,
in
I
and of
don't think
itself
so.
is a very strange language. But I think that at that time it was relatively well defined. And so I think some of this probably has to do with the exponential rate, the explosion of technological advancement, and there being so much access and so much more and new information that it makes those old categorizations, those old definitions harder to use accurately. And so we have lapsed and allowed these words to be used in a manner that is outside of their original intent, when maybe in reality we need new words instead of reusing old words that kind of represent it but don't fully represent it.
Well, that's why I ask you about modern masculinity, because I felt like there's a change there.
And I think that's really hard to pin down.
So here's kind of where my brain went. So I think that I can say it reasonably. I think that modern masculinity is showing an expression of strength. And I, Callie, am not going to put a definition on what kind of strength that is. It has to be physical strength. It has to be emotional strength. It has to be intellectual strength. But they have to show some kind of strength. They have to be responsible for their own actions and come at things with a sense of integrity to show that accountability and responsibility and
Character.
Yes. They have to maintain a level of emotional intelligence that I think is characterized by respect for themselves, but also others, whether they agree or disagree, but they can be respectful. And then I think they must possess the courage to be vulnerable and committed to their own growth, their personal growth, as well as the growth of their community.
I'm struggling to stay with you on this one, Gig, not because that those aren't fantastic ideals, but I don't think that those are masculine ideals. I think that those are ideals for people in general, what people should strive for.
Well,
because
and
I don't think you should exclude women from those goals as well.
Which I think is kind of my point. I think that we can treat people more consistently across the board and hold them accountable more consistently across the board rather than just by their gender. This is what a man has to do. And so these are the rules that he has to follow versus these are the ones that a woman has to follow. These are our community rules. These are who we are striving to be as human beings. And that leaves enough room for you to bring your personal strengths, but also your personal vulnerabilities that you are then working on and getting better.
And to me, that is not asexual. Because I think, somebody can jump in and go, you're asking us to be, homogenous. That's
androgynous.
I don't think so. What?
Androgynous.
Thank you. I don't think that's it at all. I really do think it's a matter of asking each individual to bring their best forward.
And I think that's excellent and a good thing to do in general, but I also think it's kind of getting away from the topic at hand, because we do need to face the reality that men and women are different. We have different brain chemistry. We think about things differently. There are instances I think we should all be treated fairly, but I think we should be treated differently in some respects.
I agree with you.
I agree with you, but I'm also curious as to what some of those respects are that you speak of.
I think that's a really great question, and one that I probably personally need to more well define. And I don't know that I'm prepared to articulate it. So
next week on Two Millennials and Mom.
Maybe
future podcast.
Yeah.
So let me tell you about a guy I read about. Hassan Piker pumps iron, likes weapons, and wears pearls. His brand of masculinity has won him many fans online, and he has been a useful vehicle for his politics. He thinks being a man is simple. He is an internet personality. He's 33 years old. He's a bro, inhales supplements, uses nicotine patches, and cross-dresses. And he has this huge following online. And part of that is, I think, that he's showing a different level of acceptance.
I've been waiting for Hassan Piker to come up on this podcast.
I had never heard of this. Who this is?
It depends on who you ask. But from what I have seen of Hassan Piker, he is what I would consider to be extremely far left. And he is a relatively masculine and attractive guy, and he does have certain levels of tolerance. Before you start idolizing Hassan Piker, you might want to go take a look at some of his stances on some things.
I'm not idolizing him. I'm just saying here is a different idea. And he says this is all about confidence.
Well, I think that has a huge role in masculinity in general.
But here's the other part of it. He is supposedly a good-looking guy. And so he's getting by with a little bit more, too, because he's a good-looking guy, right?
I think there's that definitely doesn't hurt. I think there's a little bit more to his success, personally, but...
Where did you find Hassan Piker?
Me? There was an article about him in the New York Times. I didn't know Cole had been silently waiting on. Just so curious as to why you were waiting for him to pop up.
That might be for another episode.
Next week on Two Millennials and Mom.
Okay, well, let's segue then. So, and
Wait, hold on. Before we segue too far, what was the purpose? What was your point in bringing him up?
I think he's a different idea of what masculinity is. And I'm not saying he's right or wrong, but I guess I am kind of giving him kudos to say, he has this following that is saying, you don't have to be X, Y, and Z to be a man. I'm not going into his politics. Don't know anything about his politics. I'm just going off of this article that says
maybe
he's got this following.
Maybe you can define for me what about him is masculine.
I just Googled him and he's 6'3" and has a beard. That's all I know about him.
That's pretty masculine.
That's all I got.
And is, active and physically fit and strong personality.
Okay, so everything except for the beard part are also traits that women can have, none of which are particularly male.
Valid point. But I think that goes back to what we were saying. Our definition of masculinity isn't really cutting it anymore. And it is such a weak definition between everybody of what that means. Maybe, and I go back to me, emasculating is really serious and taking someone completely down from their confidence and eliminating their, I don't want to say
their male identity.
Their male identity. Okay.
Yeah. So essentially defining someone as less of a man because of something else.
Yes. Don't want to say that, but yes.
Well, that would be the definition of emasculating someone. So masculine or masculinity is having qualities or an appearance traditionally associated with men or boys. That's the textbook definition of masculine. Masculinity is just the havingness of that. Emasculating is reducing or removing that. And so to essentially say you are less of a man because of XYZ. And now, personally, I don't think if you want to put on pearls and high heels, that is the definition of removing masculinity because you are now emulating female characteristics. But I don't think that makes you less of a man personally if you identify yourself as a man and that's what you want to do. I don't care. It doesn't really affect me. But to say, oh, you work your ass off, but you only make $30,000 a year, you're less of a man.
Exactly.
Is emasculating and I think detrimental and would not have a positive impact on most people, I wouldn't think.
I think it would have the same impact on a woman.
I think there is less expectation for a woman to be the provider for her family, traditionally speaking.
Traditionally speaking, and yet we're looking at a large population of single moms, a large population of single women. And so maybe that definition is at a time.
I have a blogger that I follow online, and she recently here, like 2.5, 3 years ago, got divorced. And they're this very lovely white picket fence kind of family. And I want to say it was in 6 months, he had gotten remarried. They have 3 kids, probably, let's call it 8, 10 and 12 at the time when they got divorced. So the dad got remarried, and the mom, I mean, they're well-to-do, especially now with her influencer career and all of this. She's a DIYer, and she said something on one of her stories the other day about being a single mom, and the internet came for her. Like, absolutely came for her. About
Why?
you are not a single mom. Other moms that like her and follow her every day came for her, and they're like, you're not a single mom. You're a co-parent. You're a co-parent. And so it was kind of strange to me. And I didn't put a ton of stock into it until right now and us having this conversation. But she got so much shit because she isn't doing this all alone. They trade off, and they each have the kids for certain days of the week, and they have different holiday schedules and all of this. What defines a single parent anymore?
To me, a single parent is somebody who doesn't have another adult in the parent role. They're doing it all on their own.
So I have a friend who is getting remarried in a couple of weeks, who got a divorce several years ago, who has 2 children. He would not be a single parent, but his ex-wife would, because she is not remarried, even though they are both parents to these children, and they both support and help raise these children. She is a single parent, and he is not, simply because he is now in a relationship.
So
it's more than him being in a relationship. It's that assuming that he and his new wife have agreed to parent these children together.
Sure, but if his ex-wife
now they go from
only
2 parents to
spends
3
half of the time
parents.
with the children, she gets to be a single mom, but even
Because
though
she
she's
doesn't have
getting
anybody
support,
else. Do what?
even though he is raising the kids half the time, they're co-parenting.
So what does that make a woman who they have children and he dies? That would be a single parent, because there is one parent raising these children, where like Cole's friend in that case, I would say that neither of them are single parents, because they still have the other one contributing to the parenting.
While I wouldn't call him a single parent, because he is now in a relationship and has that extra set of hands to help raise these kids, in her situation, even though he's got the kids half the time, she's still a single mom. Having help doesn't take anything away from you. Having help as a single parent doesn't make you a worse parent.
Right. No, which is not at all what I am insinuating. Not even a little bit. I'm just trying to kind of figure out if, in my brain, we're talking about definitions and how we define words, right? In my brain, a single parent, when mom's talking about all of these single parents, these single moms who are having to step up for their kids, that's because they have no counterpart. So that's not to say that they're not ever going to get married again or be in another relationship or whatever. They talk about it in this podcast. Where have all the good men gone? I'm really curious where all of those men are. Are they separating from their wives, girlfriends, baby mamas, whatever it is, and then never in their lives ever again? Are they still contributing financially? Are they still contributing with time? Are they just sitting at a bar getting drunk all day by themselves? Like where are they?
Sometimes it's all 3.
Sometimes it can be all 3. But what does that actually mean? And where does the research kind of land on those things? Because contributing financially is helpful. And I get that. And I'm sure that they appreciate it. Not contributing financially, but it isn't everything. You're totally right. It isn't everything, but none of those things is everything alone, right? That's the definition of everything. And so when we're sitting here talking about single moms or single parents, in my brain, they don't have a counterpart contributing anything.
I think there's a lot of single moms out there that would not be the case for.
And so that's why I brought up this blogger. A whole bunch of single moms who their partners have died were upset about all of this. You're not a single mom, you're a co-parent.
And she is. And obviously her ex-husband is contributing. And I think that's
I don't think that makes her not a single mom, though.
But she's remarried, correct?
She is not remarried, no.
Well, I thought she'd remarried.
No, he had remarried.
I thought she had too. No, then I disagree. I think she is a single mom. And there's so much variety in there. Who's got custodial care? Who's got financial help and who doesn't have financial help? But technically, if she's living in a house by herself with just her kids, even if that's part-time, she's a single mom.
Yeah, she doesn't have the other half of that parentage there with her helping while she's there.
I think it's very interesting, though, that she got so much pushback, and that's because of her level of influence, I think. That they're seeing this as, you're not struggling. And
But
like, who
everybody
are
has
you
this
to
idea
define that
your
struggle?
struggles aren't as hard as my struggles. They could be the exact same
Well,
struggles, but they're
I'm
not
just
as hard.
saying, there's a difference between a woman who has children and has financial means
Sure.
and has a male role model somewhere in those kids' lives, and a mom who is barely scraping by. There's no male role model. There's a difference.
Yeah,
They're
but I don't think
both
single mom
moms.
should be the thing that is differentiating them. And I don't think that one should be mad at the other for talking about her struggles, even if they perceive their struggles as
Well,
less.
it's like you said, our struggles are always the
Yeah, mine
more
are always
critical.
harder than yours.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's funny.
And I think that's just human nature. But I still I don't get that one to get mad at an influencer online who is raising her children by herself when she has them. Okay, yeah, maybe she doesn't have them full time. Okay, so she's a single mom half of the week or every other week or on weekends or whatever it is.
And that was kind of her struggle too. She was like, so even though I'm raising them half of the time by myself, I don't get to classify myself as this. And she was very reserved in her reaction. So I don't know where she landed or any of that. And this was several months ago now, but I don't know where she landed. Probably. I just, again, I go back to, I think that our best bet as a society is to come in with your best foot forward and be willing to take ownership, accountability when it strikes, when you need to, having integrity.
And the rest of us need to have a little bit of grace.
Yeah.
And, good Lord, if you hold us to everything that we utter out of our mouths, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble.
TikTok has done a very good job at talking about our toxic femininity, Mom. They came for us the other day during our short about how to load and unload a dishwasher, about how horrible we are and how we are ruining our marriages. This is such a critical thing,
Callie.
What?
This is such a critical thing to think about.
Right. But it kind of goes back to that thing Cole was saying a minute ago. My struggles are for sure the hardest. Mine are definitely harder than yours. And the fact that we were complaining about people helping us empty and load the dishwasher made us horrible people. And again, I think that goes to show that as a society, we're not doing a very good job at having any grace for anybody else.
No.
And and I got so frustrated during that. I was like, you've taken the entire context of this conversation. Yeah. You've got a 90-second clip and you are judging my entire personality and character based on 90 seconds of what I've put out on the internet.
Yeah.
That isn't real. Right. Welcome to the internet. And Cole was so good. He's like, don't read the comments, like leave it alone. It's just how the internet works. But it is a struggle for me. I was sitting there. I even said it in that conversation. You can listen to it in the episode. I'm like, I don't care. Like, I'm just so thankful that somebody else is putting dishes in the dishwasher. I'm just thankful. Is it annoying to me that they don't put them in the way that I consider to the right way? Sure. For the efficiency of it. But they missed out on so much. And Mom, you said it too. You're like, Callie, they're judging you based on 90 seconds. Yeah. They're judging you based on this little tiny speck of who you are and what you stand for. That doesn't make it real. And so I think that we can kind of apply that same thing to what it is that we're talking about with all of today's men. We're judging men based on whether or not they're 6 feet tall. Their whole character is judged based on that 90-second clip, that 180 character bio. And we're missing out on great men, especially men. I'm sure that we're missing out on great women too, but we're missing out on these great men, never giving them a chance because of 90 seconds, a 90-second blip. You have no context.
And it's a significant trend that we're seeing. I mean, Cole, I think in some ways you personify this because there's that generation that starts there that doesn't feel like they're up to snuff, that feels like they're missing something or that they're not going to have something
less than.
And that's a really significant problem. And the whole time I was listening to this, I was thinking, you know what? women have been doing this for a really long time. Women have been pushed down and criticized, and they're too fat, or they're too skinny, or they're too tall, or they talk too loud, or their hair's red, and so I struggled a little with empathy here, but at the same time,
Isn't that kind of the problem? Isn't that kind of the problem?
Yeah. It's just all of a sudden it's more prevalent on this generation of boys. And I do not want to discount the gains that women have made, because they've fought long and hard for those gains, and in my opinion are deserving for those gains. And yes, there are some elements of that may have gone, off the board. But at the same time, first off, if you're looking at a society who chooses to make 50% of the population one way or the other irrelevant, what's going on?
Their society's not going to be around for very long.
I mean, you have a point.
I think you're absolutely right in that the societal advances for women must be celebrated and should be celebrated because they were necessary for a better society. But I also think that it can be overdone. And like we talked about at the beginning, it can't be like if you've got two levels, you had men here and women were here. It should have been bringing women up to meet the men instead of bringing the men down to meet the women. So now what we have to do is we have to both continue to pull each other up through mutual respect and empathy. We have to continue to build each other, not break each other down to make us better, which I think is not in human nature. I think that's very difficult to do.
I think it's necessary to do.
I don't disagree.
So one of the interesting things is Logan asked them what they thought could be done, and she gave them both that they were both strong voices related to this. And so she kind of said, what would your dating boot camp look like? And I thought it was really interesting. One of the things that she talked about that I thought was really fascinating was men's groups, that her husband had pulled together a group of men, not just that they shot the crap with, but that they held each other accountable. She said they meet, I think, once a month, and everybody comes with 2 slips of paper of issues that they're having in their lives. And they kind of go around the table, and whoever's got the most pressing issue is the one that they discuss. And she said there's a vulnerability about that. There is a part of that helps them build each other up. And I'm sure that in discussing somebody else's problems, you realize, okay, maybe mine are not.
Maybe mine aren't so bad.
Yeah. And so I think it's a really fascinating idea. And I think women are better at this, to having groups and talking, than men are. But I think, wow, what a cool idea. So, Cole, would you do that?
Oh, I think that would, I probably would. I think that personally I would struggle with that a little bit with ego, but I think in the long run, it certainly has the potential to have a positive impact. I think I would struggle to initiate that engagement personally.
I get that. But to some extent, Cole, is that not, and maybe you're potentially only on the first step of that journey, but is that not what you're doing when you get together with your boys to go play disc golf? And it may not be as classically defined as, hey, we're going to sit down and be vulnerable and talk to each other, but it is what you're doing.
Yeah, to some degree, sure. But we're doing that as a recreational activity, that the intent is not to better ourselves through that engagement.
No, but you have multi-generations going on there. I'm sure y'all are having some conversations and you're getting multiple viewpoints, which I think is really significant.
Yeah. Like I said, the first step in that journey of progress, and I think is a lot more than can be said for a lot of men.
I mean,
and there would be some humor in that group that came in, if they came in with their little sticky notes. That would be an interesting.
True.
Trust me, it is.
I mean, but I'm sitting here thinking of several of the men, just in my immediate orbit, and that isn't really a thing. Women get together and do book club or knitting night or whatever it may be. And girls night. Yeah. And I don't think that men have nearly as many opportunities or create as many opportunities for themselves to get together and chat.
Yeah, I would say most men don't maintain the same rigidity of schedule. they're not doing it as frequently and as consistently. I would agree with that.
They also talked, and I thought this was fascinating, that men talk side by side and women talk face to face.
Yeah.
And what the difference in that conversation.
Well, the vulnerability aspect is substantially lessened when you're not looking at somebody in their eyes.
Yeah.
You know, there's
But
a deal I saw a thing, if you want to improve your marriage or your relationship with your spouse, have a 7-second kiss and a 60-second just look each other in the eyes every day. You don't have
And
to
that's
like
hard
it,
to
but
do.
do it. It is. It's hard to do, but you're focusing on looking each other in the eyes and seeing more than just, oh, really quick, I saw you. Okay, good enough. You just came home from work. Okay, cool. Oh yeah,
Love
you
ya.
did accomplish that task on our to-do list. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
It's intentional. And I'm sure that makes a lot of sense in kind of that stereotype of men just having an opportunity to, I don't want to call it dodging vulnerability, but kind of.
Yeah. Okay. So the other thing was emotional intelligence. And they were both that young men are, and we've talked about this, boys develop slower than girls. And so their emotional intelligence is something that they need to work on. That, and this is one of the sad things that I had to agree with this is, and I've said this before, we want men to be vulnerable. We want men to communicate with us. And at the same time, we sometimes shame them for doing that.
Well, I think part of that is, this is going to sound horrible. I think part of that is, and Mom, you touched on it a minute ago, women have been doing this for a long time. We are emotionally more evolved than men. Let's think about it on a scale of 1 to 10 on a track, right? So women may be up here at a 6, and then the man comes in at a 2. We have to step 4 steps back to get to them and to meet them where they are. And then we're frustrated. I've made all of this progress and now I have to come deal with your ass way back here. And that's like, I get it. But at the same time, you can't complain about something if you're not willing to do something about it. If you want to sit here and complain about him not being emotionally intelligent enough, then go meet him back at step 2. Go figure it out. Go show up for him where he is and be thankful that he is trying to meet you and come to find you. He's trying to move up on the scale of all of this, but don't be mad at him for where he is. He showed up and that counts.
That's really valid.
Yeah. So for me, this particular conversation kind of goes back to last year with the whole, would you rather be trapped in the woods with a man or a bear, is the question that women were getting asked. And the question that men decided to rebuttal with was, would you rather spend an hour talking about your feelings to a woman or a tree? And the overwhelming majority was tree.
The tree.
Yeah.
Let's talk. I mean, even Stephen talked about let's talk is the worst thing that he thinks he can hear.
Yeah.
But he also talked about taking, and I can't remember how long it is, but he has deliberately on purpose sat with his partner and said, here's the time limit. I think it was 60 minutes, which I think is really a long time.
I think they said they do it like once a week or once a month, and they sit down and talk about how their relationship works. Hey, what are you happy with? What are you unhappy
listening.
with? And he doesn't like it, but he gets so much out of it.
It's hard.
Yeah.
But how beneficial it has been to their relationship to hear what she has to say. And I will say, there was a time in my life when you guys were kids that I had kind of maxed out, and your dad and I started a Wednesday night date. And I swear 90% of the time that was us going out. We went to the same place. I mean, they knew our order when we walked in the door because we went once a week. You guys were big enough to take care of yourself. We went once a week, and your dad sat and listened to me just unload everything, because that's part of my personality, is to get it out. And that's not typically a man's personality. They've been taught to hold it in, that they're not supposed to show those emotions. And
that's been hammered into us for generations.
Bless your heart, your dad sat there, and it made a difference in our marriage. It made a difference in our family life to do that.
You know, I saw a video the other day. It says there's two kinds of people in the world, talk to thinkers and think to talkers. And in general, women tend to be talk to thinkers. We have to talk and say it all out in order to process all of our emotions and feelings, where typically men tend to be think to talkers. They're going to process everything, work through everything in their head before they say anything out loud. And I think number one, knowing which kind of person you are is really helpful. And number two, knowing the kind of person that you're interacting with, what kind of person they are, is really helpful. I mean, Ryan and I have had this conversation on several occasions. I'm like, you know that I need to say all of this out loud in order for me to think through it. Just stick with me. Just hang in there. And he has had to learn to, I mean, I don't know what he does. Maybe he's sitting there playing some Tetris in his brain. I have no idea. But I have to sit it all out and get it all out of my brain in order to process it and come back and say, okay, this is where I am. This is what I'm thinking, even though I just said all of this out loud. It takes me a minute. And so I just think that that is a really useful tool to be able to process and know, I am this kind of person. This is what my spouse is. This is what my girlfriend, boyfriend is. I need to respect that from them and find a way to support them in that.
I think that's totally valid. And I think the other thing that your dad, and he still says this, and I know you've both heard this, that he had to figure out that when I was talking to him, it didn't mean he had to fix everything. Because I think we also teach men to be fixers.
Yes.
Solve the problem. Fix it. And I didn't need him to fix what was going on at work. That was my job. And so I did. And
that goes
it took
back to that conversation about the dishwasher, is getting it done versus getting it done the way you want. It's a similar kind of thought process.
Yeah, that's part of it.
I am unloading this because I need to unload it as part of my way to find a solution. Whereas we perceive it as, well, you have a problem. If it were me, this is what you can do, and the problem would go away.
You know, there was a New York Times article that came out here maybe last year, and I want to say it was done with a psychologist, but she had done all of this research, and the article was about when someone that you love is upset, ask this one question to know how to support them. Do you want me to hear you? Do you want me to help you? Do you want me to hold you?
There was a hug in there.
That's the hold.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to be helped, heard, or hugged? And so those 3 H's, what that means. And the kind of critical piece in that I have found is that no matter what the answer is, it does you zero good if you don't listen to it. I want you to help me, and then I'm just going to hold you and call it a day. That didn't serve me well. On several occasions, I have found myself going through saying, okay, what do I actually need from him right now? What do I need in this moment? And I can be very clear. You know, we talk about women are saying things and they're so subtle and men just don't understand. I am very clear. Hey, I need you to hear me when I say this. All I want you to do is listen. I don't need you to help me. I don't need you to hug me. I just need you to hear me. And so I think that, again, that's a really helpful and beneficial question to figure out what that next step is and what the expectation of you is, but you have to listen.
I think that clear communication is something that is very much lacking right now in common discourse. Kind of like what you were saying, we don't pick up on subtleties. We don't think in subtleties. We think A, B, got it, cool. We don't think, well, maybe if A kind of is sort of like this, then maybe B. Not at all how we perceive it in the vast majority of circumstances. And so I think that that's lacking in a lot of relationships. I know in my personal experience that was lacking, that level of direct communication. And I think for men, that is a huge lifeline coming from a woman in a relationship, that clear, direct communication, because we don't think about it the same way that you do. And so we don't know how to perceive what you're trying to think of unless you can explain it to us directly.
I'm fine means the world is almost over.
Yeah.
Can I just say, though, I've been married to a really great guy for 40 years.
Today,
I still
happy
struggle.
anniversary.
I still struggle with having those conversations sometimes with your dad. And it's for a multitude of things. Sometimes it's because, I know this is one of our hot buttons. And so it's going to, do I want to have a fight? I don't want to have a fight. So I just don't do it. Part of this is because I think I'm easier to get along with sometimes, that not as many things are critical to me. Do I care what we have for breakfast? No, I don't. So if you want to cook me breakfast, that's great. I don't care what you cook.
Yeah, but here's the thing. If he comes in with beans and shrimp, you're going to be like, what the hell is this?
Well, yeah, but he's smart.
Not that he would do that, but...
I
You've
mean,
trained him enough.
I mean, maybe. But those are still hard conversations to have sometimes.
But again, I'm going to go back to my track of things here. Just because it's a hard conversation doesn't mean it's not worth doing.
Sure.
And
Just
if you're going to be upset about it, even if you're just complaining in your own brain, you have to be willing to do something about it. So sitting there, you said a second ago, am I willing to have the fight? I'm not willing to have the fight. Like, I get that. Not every molehill is a mountain. This is not the hill I want to die on. But I do think progress can be made if you allow it to, if you come in with an open mind and an open heart. And so what I think that really kind of boils down to is when you have automatically assumed that it's going to be a fight and you're not willing to have the fight, I suspect that has more to do with you than it does the relationship. I am not willing to set up my beliefs on this. I am not willing to die on this hill. Yeah. It's not important enough for me. I'm going to complain about it, but I'm not willing to do anything.
Well, and I was also going to add to that, because I agree with you, Cal. I was also going to add, sometimes it's just not important enough to worry about. Go to the dishwasher. It's just not that. I mean, does your dad do it the way I want it done? No. But does he load it? Yes. Does he start it? Yes. Does he unload it? Yes.
Then who cares how it gets done?
Exactly. And so,
but I think that the next step in that kind of journey is releasing those expectations.
Yes. Yes. And so, and I guess what I'm trying to say is, I may open the dishwasher and have to move a couple of things so that I can get my cup in. But
that's just the nature of a dishwasher, though.
Yeah, it's just not enough to have a conversation about.
Right, which I get. But I think that the moment that you truly, and I'm not specifically talking to you, I think that this is all of us. I think that the moment that you truly, really release those expectations, when you open the dishwasher, you just move it and don't think about it. Oh, he's annoying. I wish he would have put this differently. And I am just as guilty in that in many facets of my life. I have had to, the internet and TikTok is not going to believe me, but I have truly released that whole thing in my brain about the dishwasher. I'm so thankful that the dishes are there, that when I open the dishwasher and they're not where I want them to be, I just move them and move on. There's no part of my mind that says, I wish he would have put it differently. I wish he would, it just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, using an anecdotal situation to make a point does not lock you into that political ideology.
Really?
Thank God for that. Because we would be screwed.
Yeah, that's the problem is I think for a lot of people, it does. Because they've only ever had access to you for that 90-second clip. So that's all you are to them is the mean dishwasher lady.
Wants the dishwasher loaded right. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I
can tell
I get it. Thanks.
She is much more than the mean dishwasher lady. And she's got...
What the hell?
Did I say that wrong? There's much more to you than the mean dishwasher lady.
That still makes me the mean dishwasher lady.
Oh, sorry. I guess technically it does. Okay. I can testify she is not the mean dishwasher lady, and there is much, much more to her, and she is a very kind person.
Thanks, Mom.
I didn't mean to get into that one.
Oh, man.
Okay. So, I mean, here's the thing. Give a guy a chance. Don't draw the lines too firm. Go on a second date. Don't ghost people. That's kind of rude.
Well, I mean, yeah, it is.
Just say, I'm not interested and go on, but don't be rude about it.
There's a thing that Scott said repeatedly in this particular podcast that you can't tell women to lower their standards. We shouldn't tell women to lower their standards.
Yeah.
But let's be realistic. Here's the numbers. So maybe women should, and I'm not trying to target women in any way here. All I'm saying is that evaluate your standards and see if they make sense.
Yes.
I like that much better because I think sometimes there's some ideas out there that need to be amended.
Only a man who's 6 feet plus makes a good husband, good mate. Just isn't real.
So,
Time for our weird thought this week, because this one I think is pretty interesting.
I agree.
Yeah.
So
go.
our weird thought this week, one of the things that Scott Galloway talks about in this podcast, we talked earlier about girls developing earlier in life than boys and having greater
Emotional intelligence.
greater emotional and intellectual capacity at earlier ages. And so one of his kind of like spitball ideas out there is to essentially redshirt boys and say, okay, girls are going into kindergarten 4 and 5. Maybe we should wait for boys and have them wait a year so that they are a little bit more developed when they're going through that same stage in education, which I thought was a really interesting take. But I also think that if you tried to tell American parents that by and large, they'd be furious.
Yeah.
Particularly today.
Oh, yeah. My kid is the greatest kid that has ever lived. He is brilliant beyond brilliant, and you will not hold him back.
And here's the deal. There are some boys that maybe that would be beneficial to. There are some girls that might be beneficial to. Not every boy. And I'm just really concerned of the stigma that would add to boys.
Generalization there, I think, has the ability to be pretty detrimental. Like in concept, it's certainly an interesting idea to say, hey, let's start them when they're closer. So all of the boys are a year older than all of the girls, basically, or 2 years older than all of the girls, so that they're closer in their capacity.
Intellectual capacity.
Right.
Developmental capacity.
Right. And I think that that's probably a little bit of a step in the wrong direction personally, but I think the actual solution is much more complex and much more difficult to apply, because I think the actual solution is to overhaul education in general.
Amen.
Yeah. Oh, you mean teach to the child's ability?
Yeah.
Instead of the standardized test.
Yeah. Instead of saying all 5-year-olds should be able to do this, you say, hey, this 5-year-old can do this and that 5-year-old can do that. So let's maybe build those things up that they're really good at. And in the process, we can say, hey, this is where we have an opportunity for improvement. Let's work on this while we're also giving you an opportunity to show what you are exemplary at.
I think that in order for us to do that successfully, you would have to take into account the variability in individuality.
Sure.
And say, hey, this does not apply to every single boy. This does not apply to every single girl. We have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. This boy, this girl, this time, this year, this
subject.
This
boys
subject.
are better in math for the most part than girls are. So maybe they get an advance in math. Just, y'all are talking about this and I'm thinking, so now we're going to have a remedial boys club, instead of remedial reading. And I don't think that that's really the answer either, because stigma that
means
does.
I think that is a societal issue and not necessarily an issue with the concept itself. I think the concept has some teeth. I think it has some merit there to say, hey, if these boys are developing later, then it makes sense for them to go through this system later.
I know, but here's my other thought on that. Statistics show that boys don't really fully mature until they're 26, 25, 27.
Yeah, mid-20s.
So you're not accomplishing anything in their school years.
Well, and there's always going to be an oldest kid and a youngest kid. Always.
True.
Yeah. So, but here's the thing. If you are putting someone through a system that they don't have the ability to take advantage of for the first 2 years in that system, then what's the point of putting them in that system?
Well, I think that's valid.
And I think goes to your point that you made a minute ago. The system is kind of
Yeah. I think there should be more emphasis on improving the system
rather than working with inside of it.
Instead of trying to shove the square peg into the round hole, maybe you should cut a square hole.
Yeah.
Yep.
Listen to this. It's Diary of a CEO. It's Scott Galloway,
and Logan Ury,
and Stephen Bartlett. Very fascinating. It is long, but very, very fascinating conversation.
Break it up into 30-minute chunks. You'll get through it in 4 chunks.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was intimidated by it, but the moment that I got into it, which was 5 minutes into it, I was completely hooked and very, very curious about where their conversation was going. And they do a great job of supplying data and information to all of the logic that they're kind of presenting and to their counterpoints. It was fascinating.
Okay, I did disagree with one where he says he thinks we need more alcohol in dating. I was kind of like,
Okay, as Callie, who is damn near sober these days, I don't disagree with him.
I mean,
I think that
his contention is that you lose your inhibitions.
You have
and you make
removed the
mistakes.
social lubricant. And so especially in a society right now where we have, again, talked about it on this podcast, where we are talking about people who are more reliant on AI and don't know what rejection is and don't know how failure works and how to get back up from it. The moment that you take away alcohol and that social lubricant, you don't put yourself out there for the thought of being rejected. You never learn. And alcohol... Here's my promo for alcohol. Alcohol provides that social lubricant and that loss of inhibitions to some point that says, hey, if I get rejected, that's okay. If I fail and am not impressive to her or to him, that's okay. I will survive this. I will weather the storm.
What if we just teach people that it's okay to be not perfect?
I mean,
I think
yes.
you make a really good point, and Scott would probably tell you similarly. And he talks about this in several different podcasts that I've seen him in, where he's got 2 or 3 sons, and he has expectations for them. Like when they're out, they have to go talk to a stranger, and
or
he
they can't
also
come back in the house,
right. And he also talks about, because he takes on young men as mentees, right? And like that's one of the first things that he sets up with them is, hey, you're gonna go and you're gonna find this much time every week that you're now going to, instead of allocating it to scrolling on TikTok or to playing World of Warcraft, you're going to allocate, and you don't have to take all of that time, but take some of it. Find some time in your schedule to go and work on yourself, to improve yourself, to make yourself a more viable candidate. But also
go meet people.
Yeah. But also like you have to once a week or once a month or whatever it is, you have to go and ask a stranger to go get coffee with you. And you're looking for a no. Like you want to get no's.
He talks about celebrating the no's. No is your way to success. And he always says, he's like, what did they say? And if it's a no, his immediate follow-up question is, and are you okay? Because the are you okay, being okay after that no, that's the win.
Yeah. Y'all, that's a big deal. I mean, it sounds so simple, but that's a big deal.
But again, I think that has to do, and I'm going to put this on parents, not boomer parents or millennial parents. I'm going to put this on all parents. It is your responsibility to teach these kids that failure is okay, that you can celebrate the no's. I've mentioned Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, coming in saying she was so excited to sit down at dinner with her dad and brother, and her dad would always ask, what'd you fail at today? And they would celebrate those failures because A, it made them not afraid to fail, and B, they would always walk through what they learned so how they can do it better the next day. Failure
I think
is
that's
not
the really
bad.
important part to remember.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, and like we've talked about on this podcast before, like failing, if you succeed every time, you're not really learning anything. You're just you're getting lucky. And I mean, and that's great, but not everybody can do that. The vast majority of people can't do that. So to expect success in every aspect of your life is setting yourself up for failure. That is emotionally very detrimental when you have an opportunity to say, okay, I did fail at this, and then go back and assess it and say, why did I fail at this? And how do I do better next time? Because that's the only way to improve.
Learning. Yes.
Okay, so yesterday I went to a girls' baseball tournament, 6 and under. And I was really, I mean, the parents and the coaches were really intense about this. And I got so tickled because one of my fellow watchers turned around and he said, why is this such a big deal? They're all going to get an award. They're all going to get a trophy. Why are we fighting over this so much? And I just had to laugh because I thought, yeah, but I bring that up to say we're teaching our kids that everybody's supposed to get the trophy. And we need to not. And the other thing that I thought of while y'all were talking is I really wanted y'all to fail while you were at home so that you had somebody to support you when you did. Because I feel like I didn't learn that until I was in college alone. And so I wanted y'all to, that when something went wrong in your life, you were at home with a family that loved you and we could talk about it and figure it out.
Celebrating the nose and are you okay?
Yes, really, really good.
That's growth.
I want to make a point on something that you just said there, Mom, about everybody's getting a trophy. I think that one of the outcomes of that is that it's teaching our kids that that's why they're doing it, is for the trophy. And I think we need to teach our kids that whatever you do, it's not about the trophy. The trophy isn't the point.
It's the journey.
Yeah.
Failing forward. Okay, millennials get blamed for everything else, so I'm going to blame boomer parents on the participation awards. Just saying.
You better go to the next generation for that.
Past you?
Yeah.
Okay. You proliferated it because millennials are the ones that got the trophies.
Yeah, I think it was a boomer trait. Well, my kid is just as good as anybody else's kid, so they get a trophy too.
Yep.
I think that if you look at that today and you look at parents today, I knew my kids did wrong things. And so, and I did not.
Yeah, Gig, I think that's after us. I think that's like older Gen Z, younger millennials. So that's probably a Gen X thing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm just not blaming millennials on this one.
Okay, that's fine. But don't be blaming me either.
I might.
Okay,
they had parents too.
We did our weird thought about red shirting boys. Now, and I'm going to cry on this one, but it can be for a totally different reason because I'm going to be laughing so hard. Callie had a little incident this weekend.
Our good news is that Danny is still alive. We're celebrating that this weekend.
Yes.
Okay, so I talked about TikTok coming for us the other day because we're horrible and the worst people on the entire planet.
Toxic feminines.
And then yesterday, the internet showed up. Threads, my Threads family showed up in force in so many ways in order to defend me. So a few nights ago, we're sitting here at home doing stuff, watching TV, whatever it is, and we keep hearing this beeping. Beep, beep, beep. And then it would stop and it would go away. The long and the short of it is we spent an entire night, overnight, up, standing, not on our phones, not talking, sitting with decibel meters on our phones out, trying to figure out and pinpoint where this beeping that was randomly going off. There was no rhyme or reason as to when it went off. I was keeping a log. Trust me, I know.
And it wasn't all a beep, was it?
No, it was 3 beeps every time.
Oh.
And we could not find this stupid beeping. Come to find out.
Well, wait, you went to the internet. You went to Threads.
I did. People. I said, guys, what could this beeping be? And after we got through a plethora of people telling me that A, it was for sure the smoke detectors, which it was not, and B, that it was the smoke detector in a weird place that you would never imagine there would be a smoke detector, like under your sink, where your garbage disposal is.
They do have those there sometimes.
They do, because garbage disposals are one of the primary causes of house fires, I learned. Really? It was not my printer. These are all things that people suggested to me, which was super helpful. It was not my printer. It was not my neighbor's. It was not my neighbor's phone. It was not the garage door opener. It was not the refrigerator being left open. It was not the smoke detectors. It was not where the Verizon internet comes into my house that has a battery backup that the battery was dying. It was none of these things, which all of them were suggested. Not my water heater, tankless or not tankless. It was none of these things, which I appreciated everybody trying to come in and help me find out what it was.
You were ready to literally burn the house down.
Totally ready.
Y'all, and I don't even know how you did this, but y'all turned off the electricity to your entire house?
The whole thing, because it's got to be something plugged in. We unplugged
the breakers, Mom.
We unplugged rooms full of things. I mean, everything. We were tearing our house apart trying to figure out where this freaking beeping was coming from.
You had arguments.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. You need to get your ass up and come help me find this. You need to get your ass up and come help me find this. This is the most ridiculous thing. It was horrible. Not a carbon monoxide detector, which is what I was sure that it was. We're about to die. We're about to die from carbon monoxide poisoning because that's what is alerting us. Not a battery backup, not a UPC, not a surge protector, none of these things. Come to find out, it was my idiot son-in-law with an Amazon purchase of an Annoyatron that he has duct taped into the back behind the actual drawer of one of our drawers in our kitchen that goes off at random intervals for up to 3 years. So now my Threads family of people that I have never known, never met, nothing. 25,000 people are now invested in this. Please keep us updated. We got to know what it is. Now I have to tell them that this is my idiot son-in-law being a pest. And I said something in the post. It's like, guys, it wasn't any of these things. Please tell me you will come and visit me in jail. It was my son-in-law. And you guys, I was so incredibly impressed with them coming to literally my defense, because I had people willing to start a GoFundMe to fund my legal fees for murdering my son-in-law. I had people willing to corroborate my whereabouts, and they're not willing to come and visit me in jail because I didn't do it because I was with them. I had all of these people who then started coming up with revenge schemes and plans. Can you
Danny,
imagine?
watch out.
Danny's screwed. He's totally
and let me just
screwed.
tell you, this is the nicest kid in the entire world.
The whole world.
He is adorable and totally kind. So this is so way out of character for him.
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh,
his
yeah.
response was, before he got killed, well, you didn't kill him.
Not
We'll
yet.
say that. You didn't kill him yesterday when he showed up, because I was a little bit worried that he was going to get mutilated yesterday.
Murdered.
That he was really sorry.
He was. So it was intended to annoy the shit out of Ryan, and I was collateral damage. And he's sworn up and down that he was only going to let us go for that one night. He was going to tell us yesterday. So it was only going to be for the one 24-hour period that it was. And he has been so funny and so sweet about it. And he knows payback is coming. And we have laughed and laughed and laughed at these hundreds of responses of people giving me ideas for how to get him back. I mean, really, I think there were, out of thousands of comments, I think there were 2 that were not positive. One of them said that they thought he was being passive aggressive, and the other one thought that it was a bug and he was spying on me and that I needed to have a conversation with him about privacy. But everything else was glowingly positive. Hey, it's probably this. Have you checked this? Hey, guys, it's not her smoke detectors. That has been asked and answered. Pay attention. But you might want to check this, and you might want to check this, and maybe your smoke detectors. And we laughed and laughed and laughed. I found out that things in our house have alarms on them that I had no idea about. They were so helpful and so productive. And in the end, it's this stupid $5 thing that he ordered off of Amazon and duct taped to our freaking drawer.
That people were willing to give you an alibi.
Oh, yeah.
That cracks me up. And
I had several people. Somebody was like, you won't be in jail because you were with me in that party. We were in Germany and I was there too. And I saw you and I was so glad to catch up with you guys. I mean, I have a whole family of people who have completely come to my literal defense to say, Callie didn't kill him.
That is funny.
So
That's horrifying.
the good news is Danny's still alive. I have a bunch of brand new friends all over the world, and there's no more beeping in my house. Oh, yeah. Y'all did. There were some people who were really mad. Yeah. I was like, it may be funny tomorrow, but until I get some sleep, it is not funny.
It was not funny the morning she called me and said, Danny did it.
Oh, yeah. Big trouble.
It was pretty funny. But we were very proud of him because it's so out of character. And
yeah,
that we were very proud of him.
Yeah.
It was a good prank.
It's a good prank. Whatever. But have you guys heard about people taking and freezing a shrimp and then you put it in somebody's curtain rod? So
yes,
then after a few days, I had never heard of that.
Oh, yeah.
I have all kinds of revenge seeking friends now, but they are ready and they are lining me up with all kinds of deals.
Just go to Callie's threads.
Let me know.
You got a whole list.
Let's see how we can get Danny back and just totally ruin everything.
Too funny. Well, I'm glad Danny's safe.
For now.
He's a good kid.
He is a good kid, despite all the toxic masculinity and the manosphere and all of these things. We're thankful that he's a good kid.
He's a good kid. Love you guys.
Love you guys.
You too.
Bye.